Hello, adventurers. Andy from Twisted Narrative here, and welcome to another Shadowdark chat. We have the cool rules for Shadowdark, and I'm loving them. The more I sort of read them and go over them, the more I'm remembering a style of play that I've not played in a very long time. And we are looking at doing a deep dive into the rules, and also for me to try and explain my thought processes of how I plan to run this at my table. This is the second in a series of videos we'll be doing with this deep dive into the rules and my personal thoughts on how I plan to use them at my table. And this is part two, and we're looking at characters. So let us, without further ado, do this. Characters. Let us scream. This is the core rules themselves. Both the wise and the foolish risk their fortunes in the Shadowdark. The darkness decides who is who. Again, beautiful piece of prose and very succinct but very flavoursome. As we scroll down, there's an overview here. Now, you can download the quick start rules yourself, and much of this is in the quick start rules anyway. And I'm not going through character generation. As you can see from this paragraph here, to make a Shadowdark RPG character, also called a player character or PC, grab your dice and a blank character sheet and go through the next few pages. You can also view a walkthrough at youtube.com/the Arcane Library. I'll put a link down in that there. So there's already a guide on how to generate characters. It's fairly straightforward, as we can sort of scan down here: name, ancestry, class, level, experience, alignment and deity, title, background, stats, and hit points, armor class, attacks, talents, spells, and gear. I'll be going through these in a little depth when we start looking at the character classes themselves. Starting level, it gives you rules for creating a 0 level character and a first level character. 0 level characters are kind of peasant types that haven't found their adventuring class yet. They are fragile, but so are first level characters, realistically, as are 10th level characters. If you are not clever, the Shadowdark doesn't seem to care what level you are. It is dangerous at any of these levels. So you can choose to play a game called a gauntlet game, and there are rules for that later on in the rule set, not in the quick start rules but in the core rule book, or you can go straight in at first level. My advice is to do whatever you would prefer to do. There's not a whole lot of difference. A gauntlet is useful if you've never played before. It gives you a good sort of feel for perhaps tactics. Whereas if you're a little bit more an old hand at role-playing games, whatever the system, then you can easily sort of move on to first level characters, as far as I believe. I've started 3 campaigns, and all 3 of them have started at sort of first level. So the stats, these are very familiar, that you would be doing in any sort of role play game, any sort of fantasy based ones, particularly talking about the more popular games. You roll 3d6 and add them together, and that gives you a number that is allocated to your statistics or your stats. From this you get a modifier. So for instance, stat 1 to 3 is -4, running all the way down to 18 plus, which is 4 plus. Now your stats can go above 18 as you spend points to increase them. But currently, as it stands, your modifier never rises above +4. Of course, that's rules as written. Your table is your table. The stats are fairly straightforward ones. Again, there's nothing that, if you have already played fantasy role-playing games, that you shouldn't be familiar with. If you are new, there is strength, fight with a sword, bash, open doors, swim. important for fighters, and then dexterity, shoot a bow, balance on a ledge, sneak silently, hide, important for thieves, constitution, hold your breath, resist poison, endure injury. Then we have the three social or mental stats. There is intelligence, cast wizard spells, decipher runes, learn new skills, important for wizards. Wisdom, cast priest spells, detect hidden, recognize omens, important for priests. And charisma, convince creatures to be friendly, resist mental control. Now, sort of rules as written, you roll these 3d6 in order, as it says there, for each stat. So you'd roll 3d6, that is your strength, 3d6, that is your dexterity, 3d6, that is your constitution, which is different to certainly a lot of the modern games. I can't overly speak for a lot of old school Renaissance type games, but I can remember back in the day when we was playing very early, either AD&D or just D&D. This is how we did it. You didn't really come up with a character idea before you made your character. You rolled your character and then used what you had to then kind of start thinking of backstories. It doesn't take particularly long to make a Shadowdark character. In fact, it says optionally, which is optionally, if none of your stats are above 14, or rather are 14 or higher, you may roll a new set of 6 numbers. Now, your table is your table again. You might want to roll them and you might want to allocate them. You might want to roll them, and if you roll a 1, ignore that and re-roll it. You might want to re-roll all ones. You might want to roll 4d6 and drop the lowest. There are a large number of different permutations that you could use, and whatever gives you the most fun. But it's very important to realize, and it's why it's important to sort of read the whole rules and digest the rules and understand the nature of the game. I genuinely believe before you start making those judgment calls, for a number of reasons. Your stats indicate your modifiers, and your modifiers modify a d20 roll for determining ability checks. There are no skills, it's just purely ability checks. If you want to do something that requires a skill challenge, an ability challenge that is to do with strength, you make a skill check. There's no athletics, there's no um, um, bending bar skills or anything. You just roll a strength check. Now, skill checks in Shadowdark are technically rarer, much rarer than in other systems, and I think this is an important point. If it is feasible that your character could achieve the thing that they're trying to do, without it being a stress situation under time pressure, or without being sort of challenged by the enormity of the task, then it just happens. There's no need to roll for that. If the characters or the players controlling the characters come up with a wonderful idea of how they're going to solve this problem, might be a rock in the way. We're talking about strength. You know, there are many ways, perhaps creating some kind of lever to put leverage on it, or perhaps kind of heating the rock up and then cooling it down rapidly to break it through. You don't need to make skill checks. It just happens. They've saw the problem, they've resolved the problem, we can move on. And this is one of the wonders of Shadowdark, is that it's not an exercise in just rolling dice and then receiving information of success or fails. It really challenges both the players and the characters to think outside of the box, to be creative, in effect to role play. And it's a wonder to behold once that starts getting through. It's also a challenge for a GM that is not used to this. It can be very, very tempting to, oh, I want some encounters, so we'll have a handful of goblins here. Moving down here, we'll have maybe an ogre. Yeah, that sounds good. I like an ogre. Some more goblins and a sort of trap. Also, Shadowdark is all about the environment and how the characters can react to that environment rather than it's just another combat encounter. In fact, you, rules as written, don't get experience for combat successes. You get experience for retrieving wealth from the crawls that you go on and receiving boons. Now, those boons could be a task that you have been set in going down the dungeon or encountering powerful creatures and receiving sort of favors from them. So you can avoid combat. Shadowdark, I would certainly go to say, is not really designed to be a combat game per se. Combat can happen and combat can be really exciting, but for me, and certainly at my table, combat should be sort of the last resort, and if it is indeed the last resort, you should have had opportunity to weigh the combat in your favor. And why am I babbling all about this? Because it's critical. I think a lot of people could easily be turned off Shadowdark because they have rolled poorly with their stats. They've got very few hit points and they feel, well, I can't achieve this. Well, first and foremostly, it's not a combat game. Hit points are kind of irrelevant if you are playing in the style that the game should be played. It is dangerous down there. You want to try and avoid taking any kind of damage, and one of the best ways to avoid taking any kind of damage is not to be in a fight. This doesn't mean try and talk your way through all the encounters. It just means that get the drop on an enemy, ambush an enemy, make sure that you can see that they've left a huge cauldron, they've gone out hunting, creeping, and if you've got the resources, maybe spice their cauldron so that there's a sleeping draft in there. I don't know. There doesn't need to be a definitive answer to how you solve this problem, and that is one of the wonders again, is that you use the resources that you've got. You, as both the player and the character, work out the best way, the most exciting and interesting way to resolve this, to move past this threat. And I think it's very important when we are talking about stats to point all of this out. Checks don't need to be done unless the challenge is so great that a check is needed, and that shouldn't be in every single case at all, and also in a pressured situation. And the characters and the players should be trying to ensure that pressured situation never happens. Never let your torches sort of run out. Make sure you've always got food. Never get lost. Beware the Shadowdark. So to me, the fact that you roll the dice, you add them up, you place them in order, and you've both got negatives and positives to your stats, it starts that process of being creative. Why is my character so weak? Why are they of ill health and their low constitution? Why are they so charismatic? And you can start weaving a story behind this character. You can also roll multiple ones, don't forget, because the speed of creating a character is very, very fast. It's easy enough to roll up more, not just in case one dies, but because it's quite fun to sort of see what characters you generate, especially when you're placing them in order, because it is kind of set. The other thing, and one of the most important points as well, is it's very difficult to plan your character or optimize your character in Shadowdark, because as you go up levels you gain additional roles on the talent table, and this gives you random abilities with a degree of choice to modify your character, so your characters will improve, but won't necessarily improve in exactly the style that you would like it to be. In other games you can literally spend a very long time theory crafting, they call it, a character from level 1 to level 20, and you know exactly what you're going to take at each level, and you know what magic items you want to get those most optimal sort of builds. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It can be really good fun, and if you manage to achieve level 1 to level 20, you feel that you have done that. But with that in mind, it's quite routine. You go from A to whatever the 20th letter of the alphabet is, and it's by the numbers or by the letters. Here you don't know how it's going to work out. It's crazy, and oh, I've got that now, how can I use that? And it makes it exciting as well for me to see how these characters are going to develop. You do have a degree of control, like spellcasters can choose what spells they take as they level up. Not everything needs to be random either. For instance, you get to choose, should you wish to, your ancestry. So there are dwarves, goblins, elves, half-orcs, halflings, and humans as the ancestries that are available in the core rulebook. Don't get me wrong, each of these ancestries are completing themselves and have that feel of that kind of ancestry. And of course, because it's so rules light, there's nothing wrong with creating other ancestries should you want. Most ancestries, you sort of have a bit of a description, the kind of languages that you would know, and a special ability. For instance, halflings here, if we scroll up, they've got a very cool one, stealthy. Once per day, you can become invisible for 3 rounds. Humans, their ability, ambitious. You gain 1 additional talent at first level. So you can create these. You know, you can have half elves. They're not here. You can have dragon men. You know, anything that your imagination wants, you can homebrew this, and it's relatively straightforward to do. So once you've rolled your stats and chosen your ancestry, you come to your classes. Now, in the core rulebook, there are but 4 classes. There is the fighter, there is the priest, there is the thief, and there is the wizard. Classic fantasy classes. I did say classic and class there as well. Um, There are other classes available. There are, from the Arcane library, you can purchase the Curse Scroll zines, and if they are available, certainly PDF, I would recommend you pop across to their website and pick them up. They are super fun and they're very thematic, and there are different classes available in there, and that gives you a very good idea on how you can design your own if you want, and I'll come on to that in a second. There is also a ranger class, a 5th class, that Kelsey, who is from the Arcane library and wrote this wonderful system, she did a live stream sort of last week, I believe, and I'll put the link to that live stream. It's out on YouTube, and you can see both Kelsey and the Shadowdark community create that class, and it might give you some ideas of whether you want to play a ranger class, but it might also give you some ideas of how you can generate your own. So at the core, you have the name of the class and some description. So blood-soaked gladiators in dented armor, acrobatic duelists with darting swords, or far-eyed elven archers who carve their legends with steel and grit. Again, wonderful prose. So weapons you can use and weapons you are restricted to using. Fighters can use all weapons. Armor, same again, all armor and shields. Hit points 1d8 per level. Haulia, this is a special ability. All of the classes tend to get some special things. This is great. You can add your Constitution modifier if positive to your gear slots. Carrying gear in Shadowdark is again resource management. You can carry 10 or your strength skill, whichever is higher. But if you're a fighter, you manage to add your Constitution modifier to that number as well. And then weapon mastery. Choose one type of weapon, such as longswords. You gain +1 to attack and damage with that weapon type. In addition, you add half your level to these rolls, rounded down. So at level 2, half your level would be 1. So you'd be adding 1 to both your attack and damage rolls in addition to your weapon mastery. Grit. Choose your strength or dexterity. You have advantage on checks. Advantage is where you roll 2 dice and take the highest. On checks of that type to overcome an opposing force, such as kicking open a stuck door, which would be strength, or slipping free of rusty chains, dexterity. So very, very straightforward, very easy to do, but also very modular. In addition to that, there are fighter talents, which you get at level 1, and then as you level up you get to roll on this. I believe it's every 2 levels, so you get it at level 3 and then it'll be level 5, but we'll go over leveling up and experience in another video. So what you do, and this is what I was talking about it being random, is you would roll 2d6 and you would gain one of these talents, and unless it says these talents do stack. So 2 would gain weapon mastery with 1 additional weapon, 3 to 6 +1 to melee and ranged attacks, 7 to 9 +2 to strength, dexterity or constitution stat. 10 and 11 choose one kind of armor, you get +1 armor class from that armor. And 12 choose a talent or +2 points to distribute to stats. So fairly straightforward, and that is the fighter class, just that single page. So you can see that if you wanted to create specialist fighters, for instance, I mentioned the Cursed Scrolls, there's a pit fighter class in there. You can change out, you can pull out these pockets and try and balance it with some homebrew sort of content. If people around your table want to play something a little bit more spicy or a little different. And again, I love this. It makes it very customizable. Some beautiful artwork there. Then we've got the priest. I'm not going to go through all of these. Obviously, priests get spell casting. Number of spells known by priests. Some beautiful artwork there. Then you get the thief, and again, their things are backstab and thievery. Then another beautiful piece of artwork, and then finally the wizard class, which again you get learning spells and spell casting. Apologies if you wanted me to do this in real detail, but you can get all of these are available in the quick Kickstarter rules. You can also go to the Arcane library and watch how to generate a character. I'm really kind of showing you what's available, but more what I'm trying to do is sort of describe, because it's characters are right at the beginning of the book, and if you look at the quick start rules and you kind of go, well, these characters are super weak, they're going to die really, really fast. I just wanted to address that the characters, yes, are indeed weak, But what they must do to endure is to use their wits to succeed against the Shadowdark, and that makes it a much more interesting game. Also, you get sort of backgrounds now. You can roll randomly. There's a random table, a D20 table, such things as Urchin, Wanted, Cult Initiative, Initiate, sorry, Thieves Guild, all the way down to Surgeon. Once again, you can roll them, or you can choose if you want, or you. And it does suggest here work with your GM to determine if your background provides advantages in given situations. It's designed to be rules light. It's designed to give you a taste, a feel for what your character is, and then for you to expand upon it, which I love. Genuinely, it's allowing both players and GMs to be creative and not be hindered by the shackles of too many rules. And then alignment, there is no good and evil here. There is law, chaos, and neutrality. This is obviously the Shadowdark's own campaign world. In yours, you can have it how you like. It describes that, and it describes deities as well, both lawful, neutral, and chaotic deities. Another interesting thing that sort of dates back to the old school sort of games, as you gain levels, you gain titles, and titles can be used because it basically says here your title changes to reflect an increase into your fame or infamy. So as you start getting more and more important titles, again, it's a role play thing of how does a peasant village react to a lord or lady or a warlord entering their settlement, you know. So you can use that, and there's all sorts of ideas here. Fighter types, lawful fighters would be squire, cavalier, knight, thane, lord or lady. Chaotic ones, knave, bandit, slayer, reaver, warlord. And then the neutral ones, warrior, barbarian, battle rager, war chief, chieftain. Those are the same for priests, the same for thieves, and the same for wizards as well. But of course, you can mix it up. You can change these titles for your own games, but it's another nice concept that as you gain levels, you're not a 10th level fighter, you're a warlord, which I think adds more flavour to it. And then we go to sort of languages, common languages. Common languages is Common, Dwarvish, Elvish, Giant, Goblin, Merran, Orcish, Reptilian, Sylvian, and Athanian, which is Minotaurs, Beastmen, and Manticores. And then there are rare languages, which are Celestials, Diabolic, Draconic, and Primordial. So that is the basics of character generation. We've discussed roughly how to do it, but more importantly, I've tried to convey not to be put off by rolling stats, embrace the randomness, and make of it what you can, and roll, and roll again till you get the characters that you like. And I don't mean super optimal pumped characters, but if you are very keen on playing a fighter, it makes very great sense that you want one that has a relatively good strength or constitution. You know, you don't really want something that you become very unlucky with and has got a 7 or whatever. We're all here to have fun, and to have fun we will have. So in the next video, part 3, I'll start talking about gear and gear slots and how all of that sort of functions as well. I hope some of that has made sense. I'm very passionate about it, and I find for me it's very important that you get the feel of the game rather instantly, sort of saying, well, I've only got a couple of hit points and I've got a lot of negative stats. I don't understand. This is going to be a rubbish game. No, your journey has just begun, and it's not the stats that make your character. It's you as you control this, and you are challenged by whatever lurks in the Shadowdark. So, bit of a rambly one, 30 minutes. I hope you found it useful. Even more useful links to character generation can be found in the links below. If you have enjoyed this video, please give us a like and a subscribe. Very much appreciate that. And as usual, all the links are in the comment section below. Until then, adventurers, keep those torches lit.